Come sit with me for a moment. Not because I have answers for you. Not because I want anything from you. Just because sometimes, before we say anything important, it helps to know that someone is willing to stay. If you're listening right now, I already know something about you. You've lived. You've loved. You've lost things you didn't expect to lose. And somewhere along the way, you learned how to carry all of that quietly. I want to say this slowly, so you can actually hear it. I'm not afraid of who you've been. Not the years behind you. Not the relationships that didn't last. Not the moments you wish you'd handled differently. Not the choices you made when you were just trying to survive with the information and strength you had at the time. I'm not sitting here measuring your life like a resume. I'm not counting years, or comparing chapters, or asking you to explain yourself. What I see is a woman who kept going, and that doesn't scare me at all. If anything, it tells me you know how to love deeply. It tells me you know how to give yourself fully, even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. It tells me you didn't live on the surface, and that matters. I know you might be used to people asking about your past with a certain tone, a tone that sounds curious, but feels careful, a tone that says, "How complicated is this going to be?" I don't use that tone, because I understand something most people miss. Your past isn't a warning sign. It's a record of courage. You don't get to this point in life without taking risks with your heart. You don't reach this age without believing in someone at least once more than they deserved. And you don't walk away from those experiences unchanged. I'm not naive about that. I respect it. Sometimes I think the real fear isn't about being judged for what happened back then. It's about being misunderstood now. About someone assuming that because you've been hurt, you're broken, or that because you're careful, you're closed, or that because you don't rush toward love anymore, you don't believe in it. That's not true. Not for you. You didn't stop believing. You just stopped wasting your belief on places that couldn't hold it. And I want you to hear this clearly, without rushing past it. What would actually scare me is not your history. It would scare me if you felt like you had to shrink yourself because of it. If you learned to speak less about what you feel, if you taught yourself not to want too much, just to avoid disappointment, that quiet kind of closing, that's the part that matters. Because it doesn't happen all at once. It happens gently, a little less openness here, a little more self-reliance there, a soft decision to stop expecting someone to meet you where you stand. From the outside, it looks like strength. From the inside, it often feels like loneliness you've learned to live with. I'm not here to undo your defenses. They protected you when you needed them. They kept you steady when things fell apart. I respect that. But I want you to know something else, too. You don't have to prove anything to me. You don't have to justify your choices. You don't have to explain why you stayed, or why you left, or why you tried again. I'm not listening for mistakes. I'm listening for the woman behind them. The one who still notices small details. The one who feels deeply, even if she doesn't always say it out loud. The one who has learned to carry her tenderness with dignity. That woman didn't disappear. She just learned to be careful, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not asking you to open your heart right now. I'm not asking you to trust quickly, or to hope loudly, or to believe blindly. I'm simply here, speaking honestly, so you know this space is different. Your past doesn't make you harder to love. It makes you real. And if you're quiet right now, if you're listening more than you're reacting, that tells me everything I need to know. It tells me your heart is still there, still present, still capable, not loud, not performative, just waiting for a reason to feel safe again. I'm not afraid of where you've been. I'm only paying attention to where you are. There's a way hearts close that almost no one notices. It doesn't happen after a dramatic goodbye. It doesn't arrive with raised voices or slammed doors. It doesn't even feel like a decision at first. It happens quietly. I've seen it so many times. Not just in others, if I'm honest. In myself, too. It starts the moment you realize that being strong has become easier than being open. That relying on yourself hurts less than hoping someone else will really show up. So, you adjust, gently, almost kindly. You tell yourself, "I'm fine." And you are, mostly. You tell yourself, "I don't need much anymore." And that's true, if need means disappointment. You tell yourself, "I don't expect anything," because expectation has a cost, and you've already paid enough. None of this feels dramatic. It feels practical, responsible, mature. From the outside, it even looks admirable. You're composed. You don't ask for too much. You don't create trouble. You handle things. But from the inside, there's something else happening. A soft dimming, not because you stopped feeling, but because you learned what it costs to feel fully, and you decided to protect what was left. That's the part I want to talk about. Not to change it, not to challenge it, just to acknowledge it honestly. You didn't close your heart because you were weak. You closed it because you were tired of being brave alone. There's a kind of exhaustion that only comes from loving sincerely, from giving without keeping score, from believing someone when they said they'd stay. When that happens enough times, the heart doesn't shatter. It adapts. It learns how to stay warm with less fire. So you become quieter about what you want. You share selectively. You choose independence over intimacy, not because you don't value closeness, but because you've learned how to survive without it. I recognize that pattern. I respect it. What most people never see is how much restraint that takes. How much discipline it requires to hold tenderness inside and not let it spill everywhere. How much intention it takes to care deeply without advertising it. That isn't coldness. That's self-preservation refined over time. And yet, there's something I need to say, gently. When the heart closes this way, it doesn't announce itself. It just becomes harder to be surprised, harder to lean forward, harder to imagine something new without immediately calculating the risk. You don't stop believing in love. You stop volunteering for uncertainty. You start choosing peace over possibility. Again, that makes sense. It's logical. It's earned. But sometimes, in that calm, something essential waits quietly. The part of you that still wants to be met, not rescued, not reassured constantly, just met. I'm not speaking from a distance here. I know what it's like to build walls that look like boundaries, to confuse control with safety, to think that keeping expectations low is the same as keeping yourself safe. I've done that math before, and I also know that the heart doesn't need grand gestures to stay open. It just needs consistency. It needs respect. It needs the sense that someone is paying attention without demanding access. That's why I'm careful with my words right now. I'm not here to stir things up. I'm not trying to awaken something you worked hard to quiet. I'm simply acknowledging what already exists. That quiet space where your feelings still live. The place where you don't rush to speak, but you feel everything. The place where you've learned to hold yourself steady without losing your softness. That place matters. Because the way hearts close quietly is also the way they stay intact. And intact doesn't mean finished. It means discerning. It means you've learned the difference between noise and presence, between attention and care, between being wanted and being understood. If your heart feels calm but distant sometimes, that doesn't mean it's gone. It means it's resting. And rest is not the opposite of love. It's often what makes love possible again, under the right conditions. I'm not asking you to reopen anything tonight. I'm not asking you to change how you've learned to move through the world. I just want you to know that I see the quiet way you've protected yourself, and I don't mistake it for indifference. I understand that when you say less now, it's because you've learned how much words can cost. When you move slower, it's because you know the value of your time. When you hesitate, it's because your heart has weight, and weight deserves care. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes the most meaningful thing is simply being near someone who understands the silence without trying to fill it. And I'm still here, holding that space, without asking it to become anything more than it already is. There's a story people tell themselves about the past that I've never believed. They say history is a liability, that experiences add weight, that love, once it breaks, leaves cracks you have to explain to the next person. I don't see it that way. When I look at your past, I don't see damage. I see evidence. Evidence that you know how to love. You don't arrive at this point in life by accident. You arrive here because you chose connection more than once. You trusted. You showed up. You opened yourself without guarantees. That doesn't make you naive. It makes you courageous. There's a difference between someone who hasn't been hurt because they never stepped forward, and someone who carries scars because they did. One stayed safe. The other lived. And you lived. I know there are moments you look back on and feel a quiet ache, not because you regret loving, but because you loved honestly, without holding back, without bargaining for less than you felt. People rarely talk about that kind of love with respect. They talk about outcomes, about endings, about what didn't work. But outcomes don't tell the full story. What matters is that you were capable of giving yourself to something real, even when it scared you. That you didn't protect your heart by never using it. That you believed connection was worth the risk. That belief doesn't disappear just because time passes. It changes shape. It becomes wiser, quieter, more selective, but it's still there. Sometimes I think the most unfair thing we do is treat experience like a flaw, as if love only counts when it's untouched, as if depth somehow disqualifies you. It doesn't. Depth is what allows love to mean something. Your past doesn't tell me you failed. It tells me you showed up fully, and you didn't disappear when things got complicated. That matters more than a clean story ever could. You didn't love the wrong way. You loved the only way that actually matters with sincerity. If someone broke your trust, that doesn't mean you trusted poorly. It means you trusted bravely. If something ended, that doesn't erase the truth of what existed before it changed. Love doesn't become invalid because it didn't last forever. It still shaped you. It still mattered. It still counts. I want you to hear this without defensiveness, without needing to justify anything. Nothing about your history makes you too much. Nothing about what you've lived through makes you difficult to understand. If anything, it means you bring context. You bring discernment. You bring an awareness of what actually matters when everything else falls away. That's not baggage. That's perspective. I don't need perfection to feel drawn toward someone. I don't need a life untouched by loss. I need honesty, presence, the kind of emotional literacy that only comes from having loved deeply before, and you have that. Even the moments that hurt you taught you something valuable, not lessons you'd quote, but truths you feel in your body. You learned what consistency feels like, what absence does, what it means when someone stays, and when they slowly stop showing up. That knowledge doesn't harden you. It refines you. It means when you care now, it's intentional. When you offer yourself, it's considered. When you choose someone, it's not out of fantasy, but out of recognition. That's powerful. I'm not interested in pretending the past didn't happen. I'm interested in understanding what it gave you. Because what it gave you wasn't just pain. It gave you clarity. It gave you boundaries that protect your softness instead of hiding it. It gave you the ability to recognize sincerity without needing it to be loud. You know the difference between attention and care now, between chemistry and compatibility, between words and presence. Those distinctions don't come from theory. They come from experience. So when you worry that your past might make you less desirable, pause there for a moment. What it actually shows is that you know how to love in a way that's grounded, not rushed, not performative, but real. And real is rare. I don't look at your history and see something to overcome. I see something that shaped you into someone who understands connection beyond surface-level promises. You didn't lose your capacity for love. You refined it. You didn't become guarded because you stopped believing. You became discerning because you learned what belief costs. That doesn't close your heart. It gives it weight, meaning, and when something has weight, it deserves to be handled with care, not dismissed as fragile, and not mistaken for damage. Your past doesn't disqualify you from love. It proves you're capable of it, and that truth sits quietly beneath everything else, steady and unchanged, waiting to be recognized rather than defended. I want to be very clear about something, and I want to say it without pressure, without ceremony, without expectation attached to it. I'm not here to rush you, not your feelings, not your openness, not your trust, not your decisions. There's nothing about you that needs to move faster to be valid. I know how often women are quietly hurried, not always with words, but with tone, with implication, with the unspoken sense that if you don't open soon enough, decide soon enough, respond soon enough, something will be lost. I don't operate that way. If anything, I believe the opposite is true. The things that matter most can't be rushed without being damaged. You've earned the right to move at your own pace, not because you're fragile, but because you're discerning, because you know what it costs when something is entered too quickly, without care. I'm not waiting for you to become someone else. I'm not watching the clock, hoping you'll change your mind, or soften faster, or give more than you're ready to give. I'm here as you are, exactly as you are. I think safety gets misunderstood sometimes. People talk about it like it's something fragile, something that needs to be handled delicately or tiptoed around. That's not how I see it. Emotional safety isn't about walking on eggshells. It's about not pulling someone forward before they're steady. It's about allowing space without interpreting it as distance. It's about knowing that silence doesn't always mean withdrawal, It often means trust is forming quietly. You don't owe immediacy. You don't owe enthusiasm. You don't owe reassurance. You're allowed to take time to feel what you feel. I know what it's like to be around people who confuse urgency with sincerity, who believe that intensity equals depth, who think closeness has to arrive quickly to be real. I've learned otherwise. Depth reveals itself slowly. It shows up in consistency, not momentum. In patience, not pressure. In presence, that doesn't demand proof. That's the kind of space I'm offering. Not a vacuum where you're expected to fill the silence. Not a spotlight where you're expected to perform your emotions. Just room. Room to breathe. Room to notice what feels right. Room to stay exactly where you are, without being pulled forward. You don't need to hurry toward vulnerability to be seen here. You don't need to explain your hesitations or translate your pauses. I understand pauses. Sometimes, a pause is the most honest thing someone can give. It means they're listening to themselves, instead of reacting. It means they're honoring what they feel, instead of overriding it for someone else's comfort. That's not distance. That's integrity. I'm not asking you to open your heart all at once. I'm not asking you to make room for something you're not sure you want yet. I'm simply staying present, without leaning into you, without stepping back, without turning patience into strategy. There's no test here. You don't pass by trusting faster. You don't fail by moving slowly. You're not behind. You're not late. You're exactly where your life has brought you, and that place deserves respect. I think people underestimate how much strength it takes to say, I need time. To resist the pull, to rush intimacy, just to avoid being alone. To choose steadiness over distraction. That's not hesitation. That's self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is attractive, in a way that noise never will be. If you need space, I won't fill it with questions. If you need quiet, I won't interpret it as rejection. If you need to remain undefined for a while, I won't try to label what doesn't need a name yet. I'm not here to secure anything from you. I'm here to be consistent enough that you don't have to protect yourself from urgency. You've spent enough time adapting to other people's timelines. Enough time feeling like your natural rhythm was either too slow or too careful. It's not. It's yours. And that matters to me. I don't believe closeness comes from acceleration. I believe it comes from allowing something to unfold without interference. So if you're cautious, that's welcome here. If you're unsure, that's allowed. If you're still listening to your own heart before responding to anyone else's, that's respected. I'm not standing in front of you with expectations disguised as patience. I'm standing beside you, letting things take the shape they're meant to take. Nothing more, nothing less. And that steadiness, quiet, unforced, unhurried, is exactly where safety begins. There's one thing I want to leave resting gently between us, not as a request, not as an instruction, just as an understanding. Just don't disappear from love. I don't mean rushing back into it. I don't mean opening doors you've carefully closed. I don't mean believing in promises before they've earned your trust. I mean something quieter than all of that. I mean staying present with the part of you that still recognizes tenderness when it shows up. The part that notices warmth without needing to name it. The part that hasn't gone numb, even if it's learned how to stay calm. You don't owe love your availability, but you don't need to exile yourself from it either. There's a difference between protecting your heart and vanishing from the places where it could still breathe. I know how easy it is to fade. Not dramatically. Not with a clear decision. Just slowly. You stop leaning forward. You stop imagining. You tell yourself that you're content, that you're settled, that you've already lived the parts of life that required emotional risk. And maybe that's partly true. You have lived a lot, but living doesn't end just because you've learned how to be self-sufficient. I'm not asking you to hope loudly. I'm not asking you to believe against your better judgment. I'm not asking you to invite disappointment back into your life. I'm only asking you not to close the door so completely that nothing can reach you anymore, not even something gentle. Love doesn't always arrive as intensity. Sometimes it shows up as recognition, as ease, as a sense of not having to perform or explain. It can be quiet and still be real. You don't have to define it. You don't have to commit to it. You don't even have to move toward it. You just don't have to disappear from it. I think people assume that staying open means staying exposed. It doesn't. Staying open can be as simple as allowing yourself to notice when something feels kind, when a moment feels steady instead of urgent, when being near someone doesn't drain you. Those are not small things. They're signals. Signals that your heart didn't shut down, it reorganized itself around what matters. And what matters now is different than it was before. More honest, more grounded, less willing to tolerate confusion disguised as passion. That's not loss. That's clarity. If you feel peaceful but distant sometimes, that doesn't mean love has passed you by. It means you've learned how to exist without chaos. But peace doesn't have to mean absence. It can mean discernment. It can mean choosing presence without pressure. It can mean allowing connection to be soft instead of overwhelming. I'm not asking you to promise anything to the future. I'm not asking you to reclaim who you were. I'm acknowledging who you are now. Someone who has felt deeply, someone who has adapted wisely, someone who knows that intimacy isn't about speed, it's about safety, and safety doesn't come from control. It comes from not abandoning yourself when something real appears quietly. You don't need to step forward. You don't need to retreat. You can simply remain where you are, aware. Aware that love doesn't only live in beginnings, it lives in attentiveness, in restraint, in the choice not to harden just because you've learned how. You're allowed to be whole without being closed. You're allowed to be careful without being absent. Just don't disappear from the possibility that something steady could still meet you where you stand. Not with urgency, not with noise, but with patience. I'm still here in that space, unrushed, unassuming, where nothing needs to be decided and nothing needs to be proven. Just presence. And that's enough for now.